Sort of the next question is that before the announcement of your presidential run in 2017, universal basic income as a policy proposal only garnered about 25% approval rating in this country. But by the end of your presidential run, your campaign stated that over 2/3 of Americans approve of the implementation of UBI. I want to ask, with this newfound support for universal basic income from the American people that's growing every day, what do you see as the hurdles to overcome for the implementation of your flagship proposal within the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, thanks for the question, Michael. There's a poll that came out just the other day that said that about 75% of Americans are for cash relief during the pandemic, and 55% are for universal basic income in perpetuity, including the vast majority of Democrats. So, like you just pointed out, it grew a ton during my campaign, and then it grew even more during the pandemic, unfortunately, because when all of the businesses shut, everyone looks around and says, well, I guess we should send people money so they can survive. And then when they did that in April, people quite liked it, and the economists looked and said, wow. So I saw a study that it was a study, but it was a news account from, I believe it was June. And they said universal basic, or the cash stimulus reduced poverty. That was essentially the headline. And people seemed like, wow, this is really newsworthy. Like giving people money reduces poverty. And so we had this real-time universal basic income implementation. And now to me, Michael, the question really is how you can get Congress to pass something that the majority of us are for. And that sounds straightforward, but unfortunately, people watching this know that it's not that straightforward, because there are a bunch of things now that the majority of us are for that Congress just cannot seem to get done. So an example would be addressing climate change. Majority of Americans are for that. Reasonable gun safety regulations, majority of Americans are for that. And so now you can put universal basic income into the same category. Majority of Americans are for it, so why doesn't it happen? And the answer is that our legislators now are no longer really responsive to what we want anymore. Now, why is that? There are a number of reasons. The main one is that their political futures are not dependent upon what the population at large thinks. Their political futures are dependent upon whether they will be primaried in their particular seat. And right now, they can generally only be primaried by someone within their own party because it's a safe seat. The majority of these seats are either clean blue or clean red. So all you have to worry about is someone more extreme than you. And so if you're on the right, that means someone very extreme on the right. And if you're on the left, it's the same. So there's unfortunately this real breakdown in incentives, and the breakdown gets much, much worse because of all the money in politics, where an incumbent starts out with like $1 million cash advantage and a 90% chance of winning again. And so their incentives are to try and stay in their seat and not rock the boat too much. Now, if this sounds grim, I think we all know it to be true at this point. I had a conversation with Ro Khanna, the member of Congress from California, just the other week, and said that, yeah, this is the way it's going down in Congress, where getting solutions across the finish line does not correspond to how we do or how members of Congress do. So, Michael, I'm now dedicated towards trying to restore the feedback mechanism between us and our legislators so we can get universal basic income passed. And that's not just UBI, that's also addressing climate change and these other major proposals we know we need. But at this point now, we're all in despair that DC does not actually listen to us anymore. And one of the main reasons they don't listen to us is because the money does not come from us. The money comes from the layer of corporate interests and the lobbyists that fund the campaigns. So the big things we need to push for, in my opinion, number one is public financing of campaigns so that the people fund their candidacies. And what I'm proposing is $100 for every voter, that we can just give 100 democracy dollars to whoever we can vote for. And that would change the incentives dramatically. Try and get corporate money out of politics, but that's trickier. So that's one reason why I like the public funding better. Ranked choice voting so that we can actually vote along our genuine desires and interests, as opposed to thinking like can't waste a vote. And there are many people right now watching this right now who Thank you, Michael, and thank you to everyone who supported me. But you didn't have Joe as your number one candidate during the primaries, but now I believe you're going to get behind Joe and Kamala to a large extent. But imagine a world where you could vote for whomever you want and then just slot Joe and Kamala in second, and know that if your first choice didn't make it, then your vote gets counted, and there's no danger of you shooting yourself in the foot by voting third party, which right now, is the message. And then the most dramatic thing is I'm for term limits for members of Congress, because we need folks to be able to go to DC, do something, and leave, instead of thinking if they go there, they just stay there forever. The average age of a member of Congress right now is 62 years old. For senior leadership, it's older than that. And so it feels like your legislators are kind of out of touch. We live in a gerontocracy. And one of the reasons we live in a gerontocracy is because the goal right now is to go to DC and stay there for as long as possible. So it's a very long-winded way of saying passing universal basic income requires fixing the machinery of our democracy. And that is where I think our attention needs to turn, because the worst case scenario is we just argue over who's in the cockpit of the machine while the machine just continues to break down.